Just a piece of advice. Never, ever follow Nigel Farage on stage. And I might have been popular, but I wasn't exactly popular when I was the Minister for Europe. My nicknames were Monsieur Non in France, Herr Niet in Germany, and since there are ladies in the audience, I won't tell you what they called me in Spain. One of the terrible things about doing this sort of thing is coming on last. I once, before, had to speak at the end of a conference, and I sat there, rather as I've done this evening, listening to speaker after speaker. At that time, it was the Lord Chief Justice and the Attorney General and various other people getting up and giving all my best lines. And as I got to the door of the auditorium to go in to speak myself, I said to the doorman, I said, you know, this is really worrying. Everything's already been said. And he said, yes, sir. He said, everything's been said, but not everything has been said by everybody yet. You know. So let me, in that light, try and pick up some of the points, and it's going to be a very brief speech to pick up some of the points that have been made by some of the speakers already tonight in this magnificent conference, frankly. And I'm going to start with something that sort of Kate alluded to. But if you like, it's a sort of antidote to the inferiority complex that the British establishment seems to be suffering from at the moment. And I'd just like you all to sit there and think for a minute how lucky you all are. Because you have the privilege of living in one of the greatest nations on earth. And Kate did allude to this. I mean, you know, how is it, you know, a little island on the cold northwest coast of Europe has no real reason to expect to be a permanent member of the UN Security Council, a leading member of NATO, the leading member of the Commonwealth, the fifth biggest economy in the world, and yet we are. And we're also the nation of Isaac Newton and William Shakespeare and Rutherford and Faraday and James Watt and Alexander Fleming. We're also the country that invented the Industrial Revolution. We're also the country that created the first modern liberal parliamentary democracy. We're also the country that actually set down and first believed in the freedom under the law and the liberal tolerance which has now become the norm in all of civilized society. And of course, above all of that, our language, the English language, is the dominant language of the intellectual world in science, in engineering, in medicine, on the internet, if you accept American as English, in media, in commerce and law. Our judicial system is widely viewed as the fairest in the world. Even Russian oligarchs go to the Royal Courts of Justice to sort out their disagreements. And we have a worldwide reputation for fairness and honesty. One of the things I learned when I was a Foreign Office Minister, it was really irritating. Everybody expected me to keep my word every time. You know. That's our history, our heritage, and it should be our future. And it belongs to all of us. You know, whether your name is Smith, Jones, Campbell, Heifer or Hoey, or Patel or Chakrabarti, or Davis, or even a French one like Farage, you know. It's ours. And more than that, and again, Kate alluded to this slightly, it's a way of life that millions of people died for. Many of them the Commonwealth citizens that we put behind us shamefully those years ago. And we had all of that before we joined the European Union. Every single bit of it we had before we joined the European Union. We don't owe any of that to anybody else, except perhaps those Commonwealth citizens who spilt blood for us. Now, that's not true for most other European nations. Just think about it. Germany, Italy, and France created the forerunner of the European Union after decades of dictatorship and defeat or both. Spain joined after getting rid of the dictator, Franco. Portugal joined after Catano. Greece joined after the colonels. Eastern Europe joined after they escaped from the jackboot of Soviet domination. So it's hardly surprising that they see Europe as symbolic of democracy. It was the first thing they had after they left dictatorship and dominion behind them. But for us, it's not like that. We had 200 years of liberal democracy behind us before we joined. And as Graham Brady said, we understand it rather than better than most. Because democracy is not just about casting a vote. Democracy is about being able to get rid of bad governments. And how do you get rid of the European Commission? Well, actually, we're going to have a chance on the 23rd of June. As John Donne didn't say it in these terms, but he said something which raised in my mind a thought that I discussed some 20 years ago. And that is, the nation state is a moral concept. You won't get a German saying that, I promise you. A nation state is a moral concept. Why? Because it's the highest manifestation of real democracy. And that's why we should hang on to our nation state, treasure it, love it, keep it, and get it back. Now, I'm going to try and summarize in 90 seconds a speech it took me an hour to give yesterday. But the simple point is really this. If, as I believe we will, we vote to leave on June 23rd, we can do so on perfectly amicable terms with the rest of Europe. And I mean Europe now, not the European Union. We can do it on perfectly amicable terms with the rest of Europe. Different nations have different destinies, and we should be comfortable with that. And make no bones about it, we have a fantastic free trading future ahead of us outside the European Union. We can strike free trade deals in a year or two, which takes the European Union decades to get to. And by the way, it's not widely known, but we've now published the statistics that most of the European Union deals, free trade deals, actually disadvantage this country, don't advantage it. And they take, as I say, forever to do it. If you look at other countries, little Switzerland can do better deals than the European Union with bigger countries. They've got one with China, the EU hasn't. Australia struck deals with China and Japan and South Korea all in less than 2 years. So if little Switzerland can do it, surely Great Britain can do it. Now, that's not a formula for losing jobs, it's a formula for more jobs. And yes, one of those free trade deals will be with Europe. And of course, those who want us to vote in, what do you call the people who want us to vote in? The in crowd? Anyway, the in crowd tell us that we won't be able to strike such a deal. And by the way, have you noticed that absolutely the entirety of the in crowd argument is basically threats and blackmail? Every single component. There's not a single constructive argument in the in-crowd approach. They say the Europeans would not want to do such a deal. Well, if you want to know why they're wrong, you've got to remember two things. You've got to do two things. Firstly, you've got to remember that actually, and I speak as a former Europe minister, actually the way Europe works is there's a battle of national interests take place inside the Council of Europe. That's what happens. And of course, the bigger and more dominant ones get their way more often than others. We actually lose twice as many times as everybody else, but the bigger and more dominant ones, and you can guess who the biggest and most dominant one is. Now, if you want to see why they won't walk away from a deal with us, and Nigel sort of alluded to it, go out onto the street and count the cars. Count the Audis and the BMWs and the Mercedes and the Volkswagens. They're the ones with the smoke trail behind them. Go out and count them. because they are more than a quarter of all cars sold in Britain. And Britain is the second fastest growing car, sorry, it's not the second fastest, it's the fastest growing car market in Europe. And under the WTO rules, which is the minimum that the European Union could deal with us, the minimum, the one category of product which gets other than agriculture, which is excluded, the one category of product which gets a very high tariff, 10%, are cars. And the Germans sell 16 billion to us from Germany alone. If you add in the Skodas and the Fiats and the Seats and so on, it goes up to about 26 billion for Europe as a whole. The day after Brexit, there will be a hammering on Angela Merkel's door from the chief executives of Audi, BMW, Mercedes and Volkswagen, demanding not that we get allowed access to Europe, but that they get allowed access to us. And if they can sell their cars here, we can sell our products there. So the blackmail is nonsense. Those threats will collapse. They already have. They already have. I mean, I just had a look on the way up. You've got Toyota, Nissan, Airbus, BMW, Opel, Volkswagen have all now changed their mind. They're all now saying they'll continue to invest after Brexit takes place. They're beginning to see the writing on the wall, and like all businesses, they're beginning to live with it. But you know the other thing about this, and I think it's a major misjudgment of the in-crowd, and that is that they think the British people will respond well to threats. That is not our history. You know, we've had threats before, and some of them I can understand. Napoleon I can understand, you know. The Kaiser I can understand, Hitler I can understand, you know, Stalin, Brezhnev, those I can understand, but Herman von Rompuy, you know, really, you know. So it's not going to work. It's not going to work. But, you know, this is not just about trade. That's where the fight will be, because that's where the scare stories will mostly be. But it's not just about trade. It's about our freedom. The issue that matters to me in politics more than anything else is freedom and justice. And it's about our rights to determine our own freedoms and our own justice system. It's about national self-determination. It's actually about national pride. And one of my favourite poems, and I'll finish on this, one of my favourite poems is it's a poem called The Secret People by G.K. Chesterton. And it's a very complex poem about our history and about our battles with ourselves and with the French and with the French and with the French. But there's a very, very famous few lines from it, and I'll just read them out to you as a finish. It says, "You laugh at us and love us, both mugs and eyes are wet, only you do not know us, for we have not spoken yet. Smile at us, pay us, pass us, but do not quite forget, for we are the people of England that never has spoken yet." On June the 23rd, the people of England will speak. The people of Scotland will speak. The people of Wales and Northern Ireland will speak. And I believe they will say to the European and indeed the British establishments in strong, clear voice, give us back our heritage. Give us back our country. Give us back control of our own national identity. Take us out of this awful organisation.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.